To the lesson. If you don't know what fractional powers mean, then watch on, because we're going to crack on and get the job done. The denominator in the fractional power is the root, it tells us. So what does that mean? Well, in the power of a half, 2 is the denominator, and that means it's the square root of, or the second root of. So a power of a half means the square root of. We don't normally put the 2 in the little tick box, we just normally write that as the square root of a. So 100 to the power of a half means the square root of 100. And the square root means what number squared gives us, in this case 100, and the answer to that is 10. Similarly, 25 to the power of a half means the square root of 25, and that is 5. A to the power of 1/3, therefore, remember the denominator is the root, therefore it's the cubed root now of a. So 8 to the power of 1/3 is the cubed root of 8, i.e. what number, when we cube it, will give us 8. And if you think about that for a moment, you may well have concluded that the answer is 2. And similarly, 27 to the power of 1/3, the 3 is the denominator, so that's the cube root of, or the third root of 27. So we ask ourselves, well, what number cubed gives us 27? And after a moment's thought, you may well have concluded it's 3. Therefore, a power of a half is a square root of, a power of a third is the cube root of, and a power of 1/4 is the fourth root of. And therefore we have a general result that a power of 1/n means the nth root of. So that yellow box there is really important. Now, if we have a numerator in the fraction other than 1, then that means that's the power. So a to the 2/3 is the same as a to the 1/3 times 2, because 1/3 times 2 is 2/3. And therefore, that's a to the power of a third to the power of 2, using the power to a power rule. And a to the power of 1/3 we've already seen is the cube root of. So in the fractional power of 2/3, the 3, which is the denominator, is the root, and 2, which is the numerator, is the power. So remember that the denominator in the fractional power is the root, and the numerator in the fraction is the power. Therefore, let's put that into play with this example, a to the power of 3/5. We can think of it as being a to the power of 1/5 times 3. A to the power of 1/5 is the fifth root of, and therefore it's the fifth root of a cubed. So we didn't necessarily need these steps here. This is our thinking, which may have been useful to us, because 3/5 is the same as 1/5 times 3. Using the power rule, when we've got two powers multiplied together, it must have come from a power to a power, and a to the power of fifth is a fifth root of a. We can think of it in those steps, or we can quite simply say, in this expression, the denominator is the root, the numerator is the power. We can just jump from here to here if we wish. In example 2, we can go through the steps of breaking it down. 2/3 is a third times 2 using the power to a power rule, and then that's a cube root of b all squared. Or we can simply have started here and said, right, the denominator is the root, the numerator is the power. Without wishing to confuse you, we can write a fractional power in two different ways. They amount to the same thing. The first way is that we take the nth root first and then apply the power m. Note the denominator is still the root, the numerator is still the power. Or in this second case, we can apply the power first. Note the numerator is still the power, and then we apply the root afterwards. So in this first case, it's root first, then power. In the second case, it's power first and root last. Let's put this all together then in a recap. If the power is a fraction, then the numerator is the power and the denominator is a root. Let me explain that with an example. We've got 8 to the power of 2/3, so the power is a fraction. In that fraction, the numerator is the power and the denominator is the root. So 8 to the power of 2/3 becomes the cube root of 8 all squared. Why? Because the denominator, the 3, is the root, and the numerator, the 2, is the power. The cubed root of 8 is 2, and we're raising 2, so we've got the cubed root of 8 is 2, and we're raising the cubed root of 8 to the power of 2, so we've got the power of 2 there, and obviously 2 to the power of 2 equals 4. Let's look at a second example. We've got 64 to the power of 3/2, so the power is a fraction. The 3, which is a numerator, represents the power. The 2, which is the denominator, represents the root. What does that mean? It means that 64 to the power of 3/2 is the square root of 64. Why? Because the denominator, the 2, is the root. And then we're going to raise that to the power of 3 because the numerator is the power. The denominator is the root, the numerator is the power. The square root of 64 is 8, and it's 8 being raised to the power of 3, which is 512. And if there's anything about the video you haven't understood, just watch it back. And if you have, that's great, because that's the job done.